Well, hello. Welcome back to another exciting edition of Coffee with Stephen. So, this week's blog is entitled That's Me in the Corner Losing My Religion. And for those of you who were aficionados of REM in the early 90s, you may recognize the refrain. Now, the reason I wrote the blog was twofold. Number one, I felt it was absolutely imperative to talk about the Trump indictments. But I think that there's a larger issue involved here. A while back, I had a client ask me who were the most impactful professors that I had, either as an undergrad or in law school. And there was actually quite a few of them that really made a lasting impact on me. In this particular video blog, I want to talk about one. His name was Professor Christensen, and he was my contracts professor in law school. Now, when I originally matriculated in law school, I was already starting to formulate my classical liberal or libertarian political philosophy. But he said something in one of the early parts of the semester. He said, the unique thing about contract law is that to a large extent, the government is out of it. It's law that is created by two private individuals with candidly different bargaining powers and everything like that. But nonetheless, they create their own law. The judiciary only acts as a tribunal forum to determine certain facts that could then be applied to the existing contract. I loved that. I loved the idea that individuals were effectively acting as their own legislators, making up the types of agreements that would bind them to one another. That the judiciary simply served as a tribunal, not some sort of overarching power base that would be used to compel people to engage in certain behavior. One of the things that I believe is that the strength of the United States is effectively based around a reliance on the judiciary. To a large extent, we've always discounted the legislative branch of government, and we've always been terrified of the executive branch of government. In fact, our framers actually constructed the Constitution for the specific purpose of limiting their powers. But the judiciary has always been different. It was seen, like I said, not as a form of compulsion, but rather as a forum for tribunal. And I believe that to a large extent, that has what has made America great. People from foreign lands would seek to invest in the United States, whether as an immigrant or simply by parking their capital in the United States, because of this strong judiciary. A strong judiciary creates a certain level of predictability. And if you're an investor, whether you're investing in yourself or you're investing in others, you want predictability. You want to understand that at the end of the day, there are a sort of a finite amount of losses that you're going to incur. If I'm going to invest $1 million in something, I want to know that if the deal goes sideways and we have to go into litigation, I can have certain safeguards put into the contract formation that will limit my losses to X. I'm not going to get out unscathed, but at least I know I'm not going to potentially lose my entire principal. If I want to take a risky investment where I could potentially lose my entire principal, then I'm going to demand a really high upside. On the other hand, if I know that I've got a finite amount of potential losses, then I will be satisfied with less of a reward on the other side of the equation. By having this, we've allowed for capital formation, we have allowed for the extension of credit, we have effectively allowed for our entire concept, our entire system of and way of life here in the United States. But it's all grounded on that belief that the judiciary branch is fundamentally predictable. Well, with the Trump indictments, we're starting to see that at least 50% of the population is no longer has the same level of respect to the judiciary, nor should they, to be quite frank with you. I think that the actions taken by the district attorney in Manhattan, Bragg, far outstrip any sort of constitutional mandate that he's engaged in. Well, this has greater implications than just whether or not Donald Trump is going to be potentially the next president of the United States. This can actually affect our entire way of life because, from the criminal defense standpoint, when there's no longer any sort of reliance on the judiciary to protect victims, which we'll be talking about in an upcoming blog, protect victims from criminals, or whether or not in the civil side, there lacks complete predictability on the part of the judiciary itself, then individuals are not going to want to come to the United States, and they're certainly not going to want to invest in the United States. And when we lose that offshore capital, we lose our way of life. Anyways, I do want you to read the blog. I think it's an important one. As always, train constantly, train consistently, train repetitively, and train with purpose. Above all else, stay safe.